Thanks, Michael. Are there any additional questions?
So I want to go back to McKinney-Vento for a second. And I do this every time I get a chance to speak to anybody. If you do not know the McKinney-Vento numbers for your community, you need to go take a look. It is incredibly important that you know how many children you have that are homeless or at risk of homelessness in your community. Every county or school system district that reported having children who were homeless or at risk for homelessness. If it doesn't show, it's because they didn't report. It's not that there are none. So it's important for us to understand that the traditional definition of homeless under HUD, street homeless, pervasive homelessness, that is one kind of definition. McKinney-Vento definition expands that to include people who are living in shelters, hotel motels, or at risk of homelessness. And that number is a much different number. Our point in time count in Georgia, it was about 3,500 people on any given night were pervasively homeless. Our McKinney-Vento number for balance of state, which is not all the counties, it doesn't include the largest counties, was 35,000 children at the same time period. So homelessness in rural Georgia, outside of the urban centers, looks very different than it does in those urban centers. And it is costing us both from a humanity perspective with our children, but it's also costing us financially with our school systems and our police departments, vandalism. There's so many things that are consequences of us failing to house our children in this state. And so if you don't know your McKinney-Vento number, you need to go out to that Ed Data Express website, and you need to look, and then contact your school system. Every school system has a McKinney-Vento coordinator. You call your Board of Education and you ask for the McKinney-Vento coordinator and ask them what they're seeing, because they know who the children are and they know where they're located and they know what their needs are. And they would welcome a conversation with the community about what that means for the community as a whole.
Awesome.
It's a quiet afternoon.
Well, I know. Well, let me go ahead and share something while we're waiting for questions. And if you guys get a question, interrupt me, please. If you want to, so that way we can get those answered. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to share a few things. The first thing is that this is our website that many of you, well, hopefully not just many of you, all of you have access to. And so what we were talking about as far as what is on the site, if you go to the newsroom, and here is where a lot of the information that we have is that's updated. We put it in the news section. And so we have our virtual office hours. And so if you go to this part of it, you can go ahead and access the recordings. This goes directly to the YouTube page. And they only allowed me to do it for a page in 15-minute increments. So just be aware that there's 4 of them there, along with the leaders' presentations. So just from last week. And the rest of them are going to be put here as well on our website. The other thing, too, that I wanted to mention, and some people may be aware of this program, but maybe not, Community Commons, in addition to all the other locations that Kelly talked about, is another great place. It's been around for a long time. I believe it's out of the university system in Minnesota. And and it is basically, it aggregates a ton of different websites in one place. So I highly recommend signing up for this. It's free. And They used to have a little bit of a different program. They've changed it up over the last year or two. But they have everything from CDC, Spark Maps for community needs, a ton of different mapping tools. And you can do it by different topics as well. So if you're looking for something primarily around transportation, maybe mental health, they even have one for housing. So this really can help you identify certain types of groups that you need some numbers behind. And so this is a great place to access data, again, because it aggregates it from so many different places. So I highly, highly, highly recommend this particular site. I've used it a number of times. I know other people have too. And some agencies, for their needs assessment, use this as like the primary location for accessing their foundational baseline data. So it's a really, really great opportunity. And so I just wanted to make sure that I let you guys know about that. Yes.
I had one question for when it comes to the data that we provide. Do you think it would be more beneficial to focus solely on Georgia or homelessness as a whole?
That's an interesting question. So from our perspective, in terms of the application for these grants, we're really going to be looking at it as a metric inside the state of Georgia. However, when you are doing your narrative, it can be incredibly powerful to talk about it in terms of Georgia versus other states as well. I mean, I always think of the maternal mortality rate. Our mortality rate is awful. And so
right,
that would be exactly the way I would integrate that into, I don't think you necessarily have to do one or the other. From the application standpoint, knowing what your local numbers are in relationship to your region or your next door neighbors, I think is important. But there is a bigger picture, Katha, to talk about, you know, where we are in Georgia versus where other states are going, and how your request and the model that you want funded is in that vein of what you're seeing better outcomes in other states. I think you can make a very powerful statement there about why that model would work, and that it's grounded in, you know, previous experience from other locations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the great question, Katha. Is it Katha or Katha?
It's Katha. You had it
Okay,
right.
excellent. Okay, good. Thanks. That was a great question.
And
Well,
so y'all know, we're going to go to a quiet period when the NOFA drops, because we want to make sure that everyone's getting a fair opportunity. So we'll be doing training sessions, but you won't have as much of an opportunity to ask us specific questions about, you know, what your vision is and how it works, and get our impressions about that once the NOFA drops. So if in the next couple of weeks you do have questions like that maybe are even more specific than that, because that was a general question, now is the time with these webinars to pop in and ask it, even if it's outside of what we're talking about.
yeah.
Go ahead and ask us, so that we can have these conversations, because I'm going to have to limit them once we get the NOFA out, and we'll make sure that they are more broad and we have answers that go out to everybody, just to be equitable.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to lose the opportunity to really talk about what your needs are, because that's community-driven process. We look at what your community needs, what your organization has found, the gap that you fill for your community, and then what your needs are as far as expanding capacity. And that's when I get excited, because we know that then we are working with you at the ground level to help fund programmatic change that improves the likelihood that you're going to be able to serve the people that you serve. So if you have any questions that are in that vein, I'd be more than happy to take those, but you can also just shoot us an email, or pop back in for one of these coming webinars that we have open, and we'd be more than happy to talk about it then.
Well, and the next webinar is next Wednesday. And I believe it's at 9:30, 10:30. So it is next Wednesday at 9:30 to 10:30. And so if you have any burning questions that you don't want to ask in, via email or going ahead and, scheduling some time with us, those types of options, and you want to go ahead and do it with everyone, we'll be available to answer those questions next Wednesday at 9:30. And we're going to also talk about our application process. And so, okay, sorry. I've had something from my tech guy. So what I would recommend is really coming next week, because like Kelly was stating, we're going to take a whole different approach to the application this time. We're really going to be building in technical assistance with each portion of the application. And so you'll be able to get a breakdown once a week on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. We'll talk about this section. We'll talk about what needs to be put in it. There's going to be a ton of worksheets for you guys to use. And so at the end of it, considered a technical assistance exercise. So for those of you who have done this many times and this may be your first grant, it'll give you an opportunity to really kind of gather all your data together and information in one place. It'll help you get clear on your why and what you're doing and what you want it to look like. And then it's something that you can go ahead and use over and over again, because you'll know all the supportive services you're using. You'll have a really clear budget as far as not only what you want to build, but also what you want to have for supportive services for the numbers, and how that applies to your budget, your real overhead. We're going to take a look at even logic models and getting to the end of what you really want to see as the result of everything you're doing with your agency. And so we're going to take a look at a lot of different things. It's going to be 9 weeks. We're going to have 2 submission dates of different types of information that we'll be able to start reviewing as of June 30th. And so it's going to be quite a experience. And it's something new that we're trying out. We're really excited, but we wanted to create an opportunity for everyone throughout the state of Georgia to have the same footing when applying for this grant. And then this information can even be built into the tax credit applications that you all are wanting to do for rental housing next year. And so a lot of this data will be able to be built on top of that as well. You can use that for both applications eventually. And so, so this is going to be something different for all of us. It'll be a new experience. We're setting up separate websites and sign-up sheets. So we're going to talk about it in detail next week. So if you have, I'm sure your curiosity is a little bit piqued. So go ahead and be sure to sign up for it. I'm going to send out another constant contact to let y'all know about it if you don't already and haven't signed up for it already. And then we'll go into detail about what that's going to look like. So I know we have just a few minutes left. I did a good amount of talking there. Are there any other questions that we have out there, general, specific, any? Go ahead. Yes,
I have one more question.
Yeah.
For the non-congregate shelter opportunity, does it have to be any connected to COVID at all? Because I'm assuming that this release was in connection to so many congregate shelters being around during the pandemic. But do we have to even say anything about the pandemic at all for while we're trying to build out or expand?
No, it's not connected to the pandemic at all. The money generally it's the huge influx since it's the American Rescue Plan, ARP. But no, it's not tied to COVID. So you're good. It can help people outside of the pandemic who are affected by it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's a good question. Well, we're at
That's an hour.
That's an hour. We're at 4:59.
Yeah.
So Again, please reach